Anti-Oedipus, Silvestre. Wishes of the tell, Penny Pings. I can't go like yellow. He may agent your bites the whistle. Works, Ralph.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Yes, it's a million drifted one these days. So it's still some. Ate.
Here I go, anti-Oedipus.
Oh, ho.
It functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, it shits, it fucks. One mistake ever said the it everywhere. It is machines, not at all metaphorically. Machines of machines with their couplings, their connections. An organ machine is connected with a source machine, one emits a flux which the other cuts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth a machine.
All right, we are getting going, slowly but surely, on our end. We are welcome to the Quarantine Collective's ongoing reading of Anti-Oedipus. We are in chapter 4.2, moving slowly, paragraph by paragraph, as there is a dense amount of extremely complicated material that's bringing back everything that's been talked about until this point. So we're going to be talking about schizoanalysis and a whole bunch of things, but today we're mostly focused on what chapter 2 is focused on, which is the nature of the machinic and the two regimes as they've been talking about it. The way that they've been working, the way that they go, the way that they operate, all those fun things. So I have my text shared, I believe, yes, in the Discord, and people will show up when they do. And then shared, obviously, here on the tubes. If anyone has questions, comments, anything, do not hesitate to drop a note. Do not hesitate to drop a thing in chat. Also, those of us in Discord, hey, thanks for being part of the DGQC. But today, we're focused on the molar and the molecular side of things. The regimes. It's a term they've been using a lot. They use a lot early on. And then they sort of use less in the third. And then again, and as they talk about social machines and desiring machines, they talk about two regimes of desire. Now, what is this talking about? What are they talking about? It's the nature of the sort of aggregate at large, the way things are, versus the singular, molecular, partial objects of things. We're still making our way mostly through this. So I don't want to kind of like continue to explain given that what we're going over. But where we left off last week is sort of the great little bits of quoting. And this is, again, Rouillet, this is who they're taking most of this from at this point, who wrote an astonishing number of books. We have Rouillet reading on our YouTube channel. Feel free to check that out and take a look. But this is where we're at, and so I'm just going to start diving in. And you can follow along. We are on 286 of the English text. The real difference is therefore between, on the one hand, the molar machines, whether social, technical, or organic, and on the other, desiring machines, which are of the molecular order. Desiring machines are the following: formative machines whose very misfirings are functional, and whose functioning is discernible from their formation. Chronogenous machines, engaged with their own assembly, or their own montage, arrangement, operating by non-localizable intercommunications, dispersed localizations, bringing into play processes of temporalization, fragmented formations and detached parts, with a surplus value of code, and where the whole is itself produced alongside the parts, as a part apart, or, as Butler would say, in another department, that fits the whole over the other parts. Machines in the strict sense, because they proceed by breaks and flux, associated waves and particles, associative flows and partial objects, inducing always at a distance transverse connections, inclusive disjunctions, and polyvocal conjunctions, thereby producing selections, detachments, and remainders, with the transference of individuality in a generalized schizogenesis whose elements are schiz's flux. I don't know why people say this book's hard to read. They use weird language. I have no idea what you're talking about. We are at that part of the book, by the way, where they do start really diving into the concepts that they've built throughout this. And this paragraph obviously signifies a significant departure for that. Machines, as they're talking about it, and they're talking about it at this point in the aggregate sense. This is the totality of how these machines sort of operate. And I want to kind of get to the beginning of this and sort of read our way through. We're going to take our time because there is a lot of secondary literature of this that I think I want to spend a little bit more time on. We went over a little bit last week. One sec, I want to be able to pull it up so we can actually discuss it. Boop, 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 boop. No, not axiomatics. Where is it? There was a piece last week. That's okay. Maybe I don't have it up. I do not have it up because I am terrible at this. I've only been doing it for 4 years. Daniel Smith has a really good piece on this, talking through the difference between how they're trying to talk through the organism and the machine. We often talk about machines as a collection of parts that are focused sort of around the parts and the production, what they produce. We also talk of the organism as being a unity of almost biological machines, centered around a singular itness, thisness, thingness. It is. What they're doing in this section is trying to marry them and bring them together and explain how what they're doing is not really machine. It's not really organism, but instead trying to get us to think through how these go together. That there is, and I'll talk through specifically how they word it here, but when we see the organism and machine together at the social level, we tend to break things into organisms and machines. We tend to not really think about where things are centered. We tend to break them apart. They want us to instead talk about desiring machines as being the center of all of those things, the eventual connection of them. So desiring machines are the following. They're formative machines whose misfirings are functional, whose functioning is discernible from their formation. Misfirings in English doesn't quite have the same color as it does in French. Misfirings means where it fucks up or something bad happens. It tends to denote something bad. This is not what we're talking about. Misfiring is producing something it's not supposed to, doing something it's not supposed to, doing something that isn't in the original plan or the original intention or the original setup as a thing, right? That's what we're talking about when we say misfire with a machine. Misfirings are functional. Think of the solar anus, the sunbeams coming out of his ass. It is a misfiring of the machine, but it still produces something. It is still functional. It still does something that then leads on to, for Schreber, he still feels it. He presumes how it's produced. And he goes through all of it in that very particular way. Misfirings are functional, and whose functioning is indiscernible from their formation. The development of desire machine, the formation of it, is also the making of it. It is indiscernible. It is not, oh, look, a desire machine's coming together. No, that is the desiring machine. The formation is indiscernible from the functioning. This is what it does. Chronogeneous machines is such a fucking weird word. Let's find out what that means. Anyone have a... Oh. Sorry. Chronogenous machines. Chronogeneous. Chronogeneous. Because that is not what they have in the original. No, chronogeneous. Google doesn't even let me fucking do this. Wild. Google's like, no, you don't want to search for that. You want to search for this other thing. And it's not a word. Excellent. That doesn't even return fucking results for me. That's fantastic. I love when that happens.
What about temporal becoming?
It does seem like that's what it would mean. I'm just trying to, like, where are they getting it from? It's similar in time. chronogeneous, like homogeneous, chronogeneous. The similarity in time of becoming has to be what it means. Who talked, by the way? Someone is thinking through this, and I like that.
No, that's me, Jeff.
Oh, and it's because I just can only work through it. I'm gonna pull up. I'm gonna pull up Anti-Oedipus and take a look. But I mean, it's just such a weird. It's just such a weird phrase for this. Yay. There you are, and this is going to be here, and then molecular Sunday. Well, we're not at Sunday yet, I don't think. This skip past this. Sorry, just 2 seconds. Did we already do Zondi? Wait, did we do Zondi? No. No, we're doing Rie, and he quotes Rie.
If you look up genius by itself, it indicates producing or yielding.
Yes. In time would be the what chronogeneous.
Yeah,
but it's
producing in time.
But I want to see what the French is, because it might be that they just literally left the French word in there, but I don't remember this that well. That's permission of un peep. Where is the pipe quote? Sorry, it's just easier for me to. I know it's exciting. Don't get me wrong. I'm very aware of how exciting it is to listen to me ramble to myself as I'm looking this up. But oh, wait.
I have the French version in front of me. I was able to find a page with the
what page is it, by
term
the way?
chrono. 341. At least in.
Was a page off. And is it chronogeneous?
Chronogene.
Well, that is not
Which
the same
is.
word.
Yeah, it's the same word, really, but.
The French version.
Yeah, well, or the Englishy version of the.
Let's see. Okay, yeah, I found it. Interesting. There's just such an odd word. Sorry if I'm rabbit holing. I'm terrible at this.
What I'm more interested in is what did it translate by misfiring?
Oh, that is, yeah, that's actually fair. We could probably do a couple of these in this one, actually. So let's see. Well, okay, so machine informative, functional. Is that past it? We're past it if I'm reading there. There they are. Machine chronogene. See, sorry, we'll get there. I promise we'll get there.
May I lend my beautiful French voice?
Yeah, it's another word that is just not used in the way that they're using it here, which is fascinating. I love it. I love when this happens. It's memories. It's used elsewhere. I'm searching through all my PDFs that have it. This is also used in Bergson apparently, and also in. I'm just going to start noticing. It tends to be about thought that changes, which is subject to fluctuation, thoughts that are subject to fluctuation, chronogeneous, or chronoge, as they're using it here, which is fucking really, actually a really cool word for that.
I found what was translated by misfiring, raté.
What does that mean?
Which, it means kind of the same word, misfiring, but it also is more general. Like it means to miss. Raté, the verb to miss.
To miss, as in, so in English, misfire means that the gun misfires. A gun doesn't fire. It breaks. The bullet doesn't fire. It's what a misfire is. It's why I don't think it's the right translation.
Yeah.
Because misfire, in what you're saying, would be like literally like firing in like the wrong direction almost. Like an incorrect outcome.
It's not that well, yeah, if you're using it the verb version, but it's more used generally to talk about machines, literal machines. If your engine
misfires,
yeah,
okay,
and
which we use it that way too, but it
yeah. It's never used to talk about guns in themselves. Well, maybe sometimes, but when we're using in that context, guns don't have ratés. I'll try.
Well, so let's work through this. So, the goal of this is a close reading. We're not going to run through any of this. So, desire machines are the following. They're, and I want to kind of go by the French here because formative machines is, I think, almost a nonsense sentence. In the way that they're using it, again in English, machine formatives in the French, which I think plays a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's more about forming, shaping.
Yeah. So like the formative years, someone's growing up, like my formative years, formative machines is what they're referring to there. That's the use of formative specifically. It's the actual literal formativity machines, whose very misfirings are functional, who saying basically that when there is an issue, when there is a fire, when there's a problem or whatever, even those are functional. You could say a car engine misfires. We tend to talk about it as being broken, but the reality is, and this is more Rouillère actually, so this makes more sense, that it's sort of incorrect for us to say that nothing was done when the machine misfired. It's that the machine, by not doing something, still produced. By not firing, even though the engine surged or whatever, it still produced a lurch. It still did something. Something was still made. The very misfirings are functional. That's what that sentence is kind of getting at. And whose functioning is indiscernible from their formation. Like with an engine misfiring. What part of the engine misfiring? What part of the engine misfired? Well, it's the actual lurching of an engine when it misfires or when it does that. You can't really, I mean, as an experience thing, you can as someone who's breaking it down. If you're going to like tear apart an engine and everything, you can do this. But we tend to think of and consider that the functioning of an engine is the formation, that the way that it is built, the form of it, is what produces that functioning. We aren't able to really break them apart. This is what a machine is. This is really a machine, a computer, as we're looking at it. You're looking at a gaming PC, or you're looking at an iPhone, or anything else. The functioning is indiscernible from the formation. They're kind of, they come together. We can critique and break them apart in some ways. That's why the word indiscernible, I think, is really interesting that they use it there, because I would actually have issues with that. But I don't know if that's what they're really going at fully. The chronogenic thing, I'm gonna say it means formed in time, built in time. Chronogeneous, I'm gonna say we're just gonna take it like literally what it's saying. It's not really a word that's used in English, like at all. Like at all.
It's the first time I've heard it used in French, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, and I looked it up, and it's elsewhere, but it's the production of time is what chronogeneous means, because it's a genic, chronogenic, which is it's the same in French. So again, they're using Latin. This isn't like some weird term that gets oddly translated. This is time producing, time production machines engaged in their own assembly, which is so this would imply essentially that we're talking about something that isn't just a machine that exists in time, but the way that machines or desiring machines work is they produce temporality itself. It's not that they produce minutes. Don't think of time that way. We're talking about time in the sense of the more traditional Bergsonian type thing of like time as its own unit, not the measurements. So we're not talking about like generating time. Oh, I got 12 extra minutes. This must be a chronogenous machine. Not the point. I don't think. But instead that the nature of how they work is they have their own. They build their own temporality. They build their own temporality. They build temporality maybe itself. The way we interact with them, the way that they're built, the way that the machines operate, they build their own temporality that sort of build their own assembly. The phrasing that they're using here is really interesting in that. But that's kind of the push, is that they build time itself and they function in this way. So you have machines, and this is, I feel like I want to go get our Rie guys and come scream at them and get them in here so they can, because this is Rie almost completely. It's a let's read the bottom here, because I do think like this comes right before. This is the footnote they have here, and this is Rie, who we read last week, and I think it's coming more into play actually here, because this is where they're talking about the molar machines, social, technical, organic, and desiring machines, molecular. Desiring machines are the following. They are the formative machines. They are the machines that form things. They are the machines that create form. Formative machines, I think, machines that build form, maybe a more direct way, whose very misfirings are functional. Even when they're not working, something is being built. The missing of something, the part where it's not firing is still something. It still exists. It still is existence, even if it's not being produced. If I have, for example, a dot matrix printer, only works by not working. It's producing, it's making dots, and then if it's not making a dot, that gives us negative space. The misfirings are functional, and it's misfirings in that sense, not misfirings like the dot matrix printer sets the page on fire. Again, misfire is just a specific word for me. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's such an odd word. But it's the misfirings, the way an engine misfires, which means it doesn't go. It doesn't do the push. It fucks up a little bit. Still functional, still produces, whose functioning is indiscernible from their formation. The formation, because they are formative machines, they're machines that build form. the functioning of them is indiscernible from the forming of them, because that is their function. They are formative machines. They're chronogenous machines engaged in their own assembly. They are machines that build time itself, that form time, that produce time, that engage in their own arrangement, their own montage, their own setup. This is desiring machines. I think so far that half of the sentence makes sense. Yeah, machines which form, I think is fair. Machines which form, I think works. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to go with that. And then we can continue to the rest of the sentence. It's just a sentence so far. Fuck this fucking book. And I think I will be annoying you as well, Estelle, because this is more of the French. And I think this is that. This is going to be. One sec, because the Butler quote is on the next page. Perfect. Okay.
I'll be following along with the French version.
When they say montage, and it's because in the original, the phrasing that they have is le probable montage. The assembly is really the wrong fucking word here. Like in my mind, it's really the wrong word that they have here. I'm glad they put montage, but it is like arrangement. I keep going back to this because the phrasing is so fucking weird in the English. Very the chronogenic machines engaged with their own assembly. I don't think that doesn't feel right either.
Wait, so we're on machine chronogène confondue avec leur propre montage. That's the French sentence?
Yes.
Yeah, confond. I don't think that's really, because confondu means can mean mistake, but it's like it means if I were to deconstruct, confondu means fondu melted together.
Merged.
But yeah.
You could say merged. You could say fused. Fused could work. Like even if it's not the right word, but it's for me, the bigger deal is understanding kind of what they're, because the way that because again, they don't mean, because I could also translate it and say, oh, machines that have cheese dip. Like that's not what they mean by fondue. Like it's confondu. It's not with fondue. It's like you could. Sorry, this translation makes me nuts. Confondu means fused. There is a merging. There's an intimate overlapping of the thing that sort of comes together. Confondu generally. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah. Well, it can also mean mistaken, but I'm not sure that's really relevant to that sentence. Cryogenic machines mistaken with their own.
And the wording is important because
assembly.
The big deal here is it is confondu. I make the joke about the cheese because it is about them melting together. Like that's the idea. That's why I think fused or merged is probably better than engaged. Engaged has intention behind it. Engaged is as if those machines are engaged in their own assembly. They're not. No, engaged is a personality thing that I say, like, oh, that child is deeply engaged in the video game they're playing. Or, yes, I engaged in blah, blah, blah. But the machines don't have that. That's not the idea. It's not at all what they mean. It's confondu avec le... I'm not pronouncing anything correctly. I apologize to anyone who's French who's in earshot of me at any point ever. But confondu avec le propre montage, the ability to sort of change that over to the chronogenic machines fused with their own arranging, fused with the arrangement that they are. Like there's a play in this on the almost a poetic turn, and I hate saying that because they're not being poetic; they're being literal in how they're describing it. But it is the idea that they're getting back to, and again, this is base Rouillère. This is base Rouillère and stuff I'm working through. We have a reading group right now. I only got introduced to Rouillère a long time ago, but again, like totally over the last like 5 months. But the way that they're coming back is these are machines that generate time fused with their own arrangement. So the building themselves and fused is important, is there's an indiscernibility again here. The indiscernible is the big deal. This is the line they have. This is why they have the semicolon here, whose functioning is indiscernible from their formation. They want to talk about the indiscernibility because desiring machines aren't a thing that you can just sit there and go, oh, look, here are the 92 parts of a desiring machine, just like a car engine. I've taken it apart with a Allen wrench and off I go. It's like, no. The desiring machine as a thing is this sort of arrangement of elements that are fused together. They're functioning indiscernible from formation. The arrangement of them, the arranging of them, the building of them, the forming of them, which is that avec le propos montage, it implies the building almost, the making of the arrangement, the creation of the arrangement. And so that's what we're talking about here. It's like they are machines that fuck with time, that build time, that create or generate the nature of temporality well engaged with their own building. And these are fused. There,
Yeah,
that's a long ramble.
and that's where the meaning mistaken comes into play, because it makes them undiscernible in such a way that they could be mistaken for each other, or it makes them one.
In the chat, we had someone who said, and I want to make sure because I think it's worthwhile. Where did I move this? Philip says, I think in this case, we should leave technical machine metaphors, but probably a machine that forms and whose misfirings are functional. Is that like evolution? Mutations are misfirings, for example. Would that fit? You're in the right direction. You're playing in a very different place than desiring machines. Desiring machines are very molecular. So the way that you're talking about this sort of nature of the genetic and how misfirings still do something is much closer. It's much closer in what they're trying to get across. But again, they're talking about desiring machines, base level, far smaller, tinier bits, I think would be the way I'd sort of phrase it. And it's kind of a lot. But it's... because you could say the same thing about like art. They use the example of I will never get it right. It's this significant piece from the guy who did the urinal, the artist, Duchamp. Duchamp had this one piece that was like this shit he had worked on for like 20 years, putting in very particular places. And while it was being moved, the glass pane broke, shattered in a really weird way. And he was like, oh, now it's done, which is kind of awesome. It's that kind of thing. There's the misfire, the break produces new. A way that may be more particular to desiring machines would be sexual perversions, which again, this doesn't come with a negative thing overall. This is not an ethical thing. This is the misfire and attachment, the new assemblage or arrangement of pleasure that is created with the way that desire or the desire machine misfires, and suddenly you have an attachment to other things that help produce this. This is if you want to read Coldness and Cruelty, Venus and Furs, Two Regimes of Madness is kind of the best one on this for Deleuze, but it touches into that. But it's, these things, desire machines produce always, even when they ostensibly misfire. And I think that's kind of the idea, is the misfire is more of an ostensible misfiring than like an act, than the way we would use in English misfire, I think. And yes, it is Estelle talking. Estelle helps me through French. We have a couple people who do that, which is always nice, especially when we get to some of this stuff, which gets fucking is a whole thing.
And sometimes I discover new meanings to words. Like, I didn't know that menagerie meant some kind of zoo.
Yes.
Not really a zoo.
Menagerie. If you want a great example of this, one of the better Star Trek episodes, the original Star Trek episodes, is the Menagerie. And it is where these aliens basically have a whole bunch of people or things from all the planets they've got captured in all these different little pockets, and they stare at them and go look at them. It's a zoo. There's a Rick and Morty episode about it that's pretty great too. Yeah, menagerie is a great word for some of the stuff they talked about. I remember that. That was a fun journey. That was a fun fucking journey.
A quick note here.
Please.
It's interesting how you brought up some part of the art history, and there is this thought that's both in art history and in art that what does it mean to have a good art? It is something that fails dramatically and it produces something better or something more grand, whatever that means, right? So if you combine this idea about like, oh, the misfire serve a function, so the misfire eventually means something that is not really a misfire in the future or in a different context, then maybe you can say, oh, you have all these flows of whatever molecular pressure, and these pressure on the molecular mutations will serve as a material for evolution. And the material of evolution are like mistakes, either on a chromosomal level, a segmental level, or a point level, which is very similar to molecular that you're talking about. Is that what you're referring to when you're talking about
I think that plays into it, yeah.
Okay. Well, is that exactly that you're referring to when you said the misfire serves a function by itself instead of just simple failure of serving a pre-existing function? Because I think that goes to much closer to the mutation as a source or as a material that evolution pressure can work on. So the failure is actually a concretized background, even materialized background for evolution to work on. Is that something that you were trying to get at, or
it's much closer? Yeah, I was saying it very quickly, and I think you might be saying it better.
Okay, sure. Because there is a systematic thing about sense, non-sense, and mis-sense pointation. It's very close to the molecular versus molar, where the molar would be the supramolecular ones that goes to chromosomal level, and you have the molecular, which is point level, some sort of fundamental level. I think this is what I'm getting from it. I hope that maybe you're getting in this area? Maybe you're getting to this direction?
We're not. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to conflate. There's a very particular thing I don't want to conflate, because
Okay.
we're talking about design machines. I don't want to get into, and this is, again, I think you're in the right direction, but I want to make sure that we sort of adjust a bit, because designing machines are not the idea of genetics, the idea of evolution, or what evolution does on a grand scale, or even what evolution does contingently. It is not, because those are all idealities about what various pieces and how pieces go together. Designer machines are not at that point. It's the same way like someone said we should get away from thinking about this as the machines like an engine. That's fair, because a technical machine, which is a complex arrangement of desiring machines as a thing, what you're talking about is more the social machine or the history machine. Like, there's a bunch of ways we can talk about it, but the desiring machine is, and it's the other thing that's very important here is the desiring machines. It's the next little bit. But what we've said so far is that they are the machines that give voice, that give form, that give time, that in that creation of those things is the creation of themselves and their own arrangements. But specifically, they operate by non-localizable intercommunications and dispersed localizations, which means they don't really ever have that's where that desiring machine is. This is that. This is a desiring machine pointing at it. They're non-localizable intercommunications and dispersed localities, bringing into play processes of temporalization, the building of various types of time, of how we experience it. So in the sentence you were talking about, anyone who was listening, who was kind of joining that, was experiencing talking through both the infinite, incredible stretching back of all of the genetic history, but also at the same time, the momentary look at this genetic marker, or how, like, the sentence and story you had multiple types of time and experience of time as we were thinking about it or talking about it. These are the processes of temporalization. And then the last little bit they have here is also the fragmented formations, detached parts. And we'll get to this last thing to talk about, but the surplus value of code. So yes, in the sense of what you're talking about are examples of how these things work. But since we can talk about them, these are the formations of groupings of them. So desiring machines are all the parts that made all the stuff you just talked about. They work very similarly. They do. Okay. They work very similarly, but they're the things that make up all of that. And what you're talking about is the conglomeration of them. And what I'm talking about is a conglomeration. Even when they're writing in here, they're not actually talking about desiring machines. They're pointing towards them. They're talking through them. They've said this a few times. So it's really interesting language in that.
Okay.
So yeah, does that make sense?
I'll see a little bit later. I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
Audio went all fucked up. Wonderful. I love it. That's my favorite thing to happen. One sec. Let me listen to myself. Audio's back. LJ, can you say hi for me? Just real quick.
Yes. Somebody said my audio is not good, but I think it's just me. I'm not sure if it's because my microphone is kind of far away.
Interesting.
Is the audio not good?
Audio is fine. You've got there's a weird glitchy artifact, but I'm not sure if it's on my side or not, but it's okay. I think we're okay now. We're clear now.
Okay.
So if it goes all fucked up again.
I think it's because I have the noise. I think it's because I had the noise suppression really sharp. Does it still have that right now?
Everything's fine right now.
Okay.
And yeah. But to continue through the little bits that they've got here, because I think I do want to keep making our way through that. Oh, pardon me. Because this is just such a fucking complex, like, large thing. Sorry, 2 seconds. They have a section, and I feel like I want to go back and read parts of it, It's called The Whole and Its Parts. And they spend a lot of time talking about the book series In Search of Lost Time by Proust. It includes Swan's Way and a whole bunch of stuff. It's an extraordinary set of books. But it is a set of books. But I just referred to it as the whole. How does a whole and its parts exist? Is the whole a thing that encompasses the parts? Or is it another part, actually, that exists almost alongside all the other parts? Very much they spend that section, I think, I would want to say proving pretty well, I would say, honestly, that when we talk of a whole that is a whole of parts, and again, this is important. If you remember my thing at the beginning, talking about organism versus when we talk about machine. Machine we consider a collection of parts, not a whole. Machine is a collection of parts. An organism we consider only a whole. We don't consider the parts, generally speaking. So that's a frog. We know there are parts, but we don't consider it. With a machine, an engine, we first consider all of the parts or the things it connects to and all of that. This tends to be how we discuss it. So when we talk about the whole and the parts, this is the beast that they're talking about here. The whole itself is produced alongside the part as a part apart, or as Butler would say, in another department that fits the whole over the other parts. This is, designer machines do this. This is why they have the phrasing that you can't really break it apart from itself, from its own creation, from its pieces. There isn't really that thing. Designing machines work like this. It's the whole and its parts. The whole and its parts. Go back and read the section. It's great. Also, I do recommend Swan's Way at minimum to get the idea of what they're talking about when they go through it, because I just vastly oversimplified it. The reality is it's a much more complex and interesting reading. Proust and Signs is Deleuze's book on Proust that goes into it, I think, personally, I think, pretty fucking great. It's what made me go back and reread it. So, what can I say? Sorry, gotta keep my tea up. Machines in the strict sense, they say here. Machines, properly speaking, because they proceed by cuts and flux, by breaks and flux. See, this is fucking just enough. It's fine. It's coupé in the original, isn't it? It's got to be cuts. Sorry, this matters actually a lot. It's very frustrating me. It's coupure. Yes, par is coupure. Whatever. It's cuts. It's not breaks. Am I wrong on this, Estelle?
Sorry, I was just distracted by sometimes my audio system freaks out and maxes out in a way that anyway. What line were
same paragraph, nice and exciting, I know. But it's immediately after the Butler quote. It's machines à proprement parler, par ce qu'elles procédent par coupures et
par couper et flux,
which is cuts and flux, right?
Yeah.
Not breaks.
Would
you say that someone broke, if I coupure my arm, did I break it or did I cut it?
Cut it.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, it's a very, when they say breaks, and breaks is fine because they need to include the second bit. When they mean breaks, they mean stop, like breaks as in like a break, taking a break, not breaking. Right?
Yeah.
So when they say cut, that's what they mean. It's like by cuts and flux, stop and go. This is what they mean basically. They proceed by stops and goes. Like bursting forward and sudden stops, bursting forward, stop, that kind of thing is what they're talking about here. It's a very physical movement that's happening here with desire. Desire, and it's why, again, flows sucks for the translation for this, because flows is like flows. Water flows, but as flux is a toilet doesn't overflow. A flux. It's a burst of it. If it's a slow, water's flowing out of the toilet, you would say that. Oh, but water's bursting out of the toilet is a different thing. And there's a reason flux and flow are two different words. I mean, this is not to explain French. This is kind of why they have the two different words. It's and we've taken them in English. We have them for afflux. Acid reflux. Flux means like a burst forward. Think of it as the orgasm. Think of it as the bursting of blood, the shattering of an artery. Like this is the idea. So when it's breaks and flows, it isn't that something breaks. It's why I hate the words, but instead that it's stops and goes, sudden stops and sudden goes. And it's by taking a break, it's a break, and a flux is a burst. This is the thing. It isn't just like a cool, smooth flow with breaks, broken. I don't even know. Sorry, this translation makes me insane. Associated waves and particles, which is right around this time. You got to remember, it's the early 70s. The idea of quantum mechanics, the idea of particles and waves and how fucky things are was getting going. It's kind of part of this. And then the associative flux in partial objects. This is, again, thinking through instead of partial objects from a position of lack. It's thinking of it through the associative flux and objects partial. The associative elements of flux and object partial, how these things are going, and inducing always at a distance, always inducing these traverse connections, inclusive disjunctions, polyvocal conjunctions. They multiply and ramify out. Desiring machines, when they are there, they don't exist in a vacuum. Nothing exists in a vacuum. And again, this is why it's so important to their ontology. There's no, that's a desiring machine. Cool. That's a desiring machine. I spotted them. Like everything is that. And all desiring machines ultimately are fucking with each other. Always doing that. There are transverse connections between it and others through partial objects and the nature of the associative flux. Because again, the inclusive disjunction, polyvocal conjunctions, traverse connections, it's doing all of these things. It's continuing. It's always out, and everything's also flowing to it. There is no single it. Everything. It is everywhere. This is the opening fucking lines. Everything is always connecting, and everything's always fucking with each other in all these ways, producing selections, detachments, and remainders with a transference of individuality in a generalized schizogenesis whose elements are schiz's flux. Right? This paragraph is basically their entire ontology, like said very, very quickly, but that's it. This is just to continue sort of the, I guess, manic ranting that I'm already on. Producing selections, which is samplings, producing how to put it. Every product of a desiring machine is also partial. Everything that's always being produced is as such. Partial objects don't produce whole objects, not in desiring production. Desiring production always produces partial objects. So it's producing samplings, selections. The phrasing, I think, in the original French, let me just check. Prélèvement. Yeah, which is samplings. Like it's like sampling something, like grabbing a grape out of grabbing apart, sampling things, grabbing from stuff. Am I wrong on that? I should look the word up. I shouldn't just say what I remember.
Not at all.
Oh, good. I'm not wrong. Good. Happy day. Well, that's nice. So it's like sampling, detachement, and detachments and remainders. So desire machines are going about and communicating and doing all this. It's sampling, detaching, and there is something left over. Remainders. There's always this extra bit. Right? This is sort of the nature of desire as a thing. So this is what they've been talking about as a thing. And the transfer of individuality they mean here, and that's literally the words I think in the original. They're talking about how individuality, the individual, the that thing transfers, moves. The thisness, the thing it is actually not stuck in the stuff. It transfers, it moves. And I'm not going to even saying from like an extraordinary high point, but it's like when we see trees in a forest, thisness transfers. The thing transfers. Identity transfers. Identity always is doing that. It is not ever fixed. It's shifting and changing constantly. It is a transferal of identity that is happening. And it's happening in a generalized schizogenesis, whose elements are the schizis flows. And that's basically, except for the last bit, which is actually les fluxskis, which is playing with the schizophrenic flux of things. But this is, again, the original French. And it's basically saying that this is a system of production that happens through splitting. Generalized schizogenesis is a splitting system. Everything is always splitting, creating new, splitting, creating new, splitting, creating new. And the elements of it are the schizophrenic flux.
Excuse me, splitting is in like black and white thinking, or general.
No.
Splitting.
Splitting as in production. It's a generalized production of difference. So like in Deleuze's terms, he would probably be much more clear about saying it's a general production of difference. The splitting of things, the schizogenesis he's talking about here, is that. It's a splitting, it's the creation of difference that happens. And here is where we find and we see these things. And these elements of that are the flux split, the process of this. Again, we're working slowly through this, if you can appreciate that. But that's how I've understood this. That's how I'm understanding it now. And so we're talking about all of this is happening in this generalized schizogenesis, the creation of difference, you could say, which is where schizo and why they attach to that term early on, the splitting, the breaking, the difference being created and then sort of brought on from there. So when we see things, when we break things apart, when things are broken apart, or how things are broken apart before we even exist and how we sort of come to them, the way that they operate is this. Let me see. I've got secondary text, but please continue. I know it's you probably got other questions or things to say.
Splitting is in like in an organic cell, creating an environment inside the cell that's different from the environment outside.
I'm hesitant to say, so there's a lot that's happening in the way you're describing that I'm hesitant to go yes, because it's the creation of the outside and the inside that's also happening in that. And I'm not saying no, because I just am hesitant there. This is the active fragmentation of things that is happening during desiring production creates through division. We basically have breaks that happen, these breaks which produce, which the breaks, the stopping of production, and then the groan of it again, the continuing of the process, the breaking and continuing. It's thinking through basically that creation isn't really a process of finding the truth within something or pulling something out, but instead that you actually build through the splitting apart, that the creation of the new is finding difference, and difference is the base of identity at its thing. So production occurs through discontinuity, like I maybe could say, that the break gives us the chance to have that split, that the split exists because of it, that there is something that is difference in and of itself. As
Are
I'm
we
saying that, I'm less happy with my language. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I have two things that come to mind, or two interpretations. One of which is just so basic and fundamental that it's almost like nothing. It's almost like meaningless, of just like anything that happens is a change. But then the other interpretation I have of that is about creating value by designating things as things as positive or negative value.
You're talking about things not at desiring production. You're talking about things that are social production. So there's two parts to this. Desiring production is pre-personal. So before we even have a sign value or whatever value happens, the splitting of things is happening before we even, as a subject, even comprehend, grasp it, make sense of things, any of that. So we're talking about that process, the desiring production of that process. Social production, they've got a different sort of take on, because again, desiring production and social production work together and kind of come back and forth, but it's a different setup here. It does play to this though, so Bateson is someone that they've talked about a couple times, and Bateson, who did work with effectively the idea of schismogenesis is actually what he wrote about, which is effectively how in social patterns we have there are behavior patterns that ultimately escalate when people interact, and they escalate specifically when things require secondary action or when there's breaks. So like think of it as positive or negative reinforcement loops. And he talked about this very often, that there is these reinforcement loops socially. So you have, and he went back, he looked through Strauss and talked about sort of the way gift giving worked and why it ultimately ended in potlatch, or these large explosive celebrations of things, is because the gift giving process continually sort of built on itself. People had to one up each other until explosion. And this process is one of sort of difference experienced, and that's why he called it schismogenesis. He played sort of with that, is the two parties and how between them they have the disconnect that continually builds up. My brain keeps coming back to that because they've just mentioned him and we're talking about sort of this process. But yeah, it's because what he was playing with is, again, Bruyere as well. All these people are fucking in together. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I'm rambling. I apologize.
I wanted to connect this up with especially the wholes versus parts with the notion of calculation and number, because I think that's a very important element of it. It shows you how radical that thinking is, Deleuze and Guattari's thinking here, in terms of wholes having to be seen as sort of, kind of almost as a remainder in relation to a part, because in order, if you think about parts as within a whole, say components of a machine or, parts of an organism, that's one way of looking at it. But thinking about it simply in numeric terms, in order to count units of something, that is, in other words, that's differences of degree, 1, 2, 3, 4 elements or parts of something. It could be anything, right? It could be, measuring speed or temperature, right? So the temperature or the speed would be the quality, and the whole, right? And to be able to calculate, numeric units of it is to assume that a whole remains what it is while one enumerates within it. And that they're, unraveling that, saying, well, yeah, I mean, that's why the whole notion of the molar level, right, or thinking in molar terms, in terms of statistical terms and probabilities and all that, right? Those are calculative terms, but they assume something which sits there, some sort of equality, which remains what it is, in order to be able to derive probabilistic descriptions from it. Whereas at the molecular level or dimension or regime, there's every change in degree is at the same time a change in the whole. So you're starting over again, right? So there are no, Deleuze and Guattari says there aren't numeric units fundamentally. At that, certainly thinking molecularly, there are no. A number is not a unit of anything, because that's a unit assumes, right, that the series of numbers are accounting, and enumeration belongs to the same quality.
I'm trying.
Yeah, the best commentator on Deleuze and Guattari that I found, that in terms of kind of focusing on that issue, is Nate Witter. It took me a while, I thought to some extent James Williams. In fact, I wrote to James Williams and I asked him about his view on the take of people like Dan Smith with regard to the relationship between mathematics and or how Deleuze and Guattari are treating or dealing with mathematics. And his reply was somewhat satisfying to me, because it did, it was very cautious. It said, yeah, Deleuze recognizes that mathematics are always, emerge out of particular systems of thought, and those systems of thought are always changing. So, he would never want to sort of, commit himself to any particular vantage on understanding mathematics, which is why, the way that he treats it doesn't really commit itself. It says, oh, I'm an intuitionist, or I'm this or that. But with Nate Witter, you get this, he goes right into this this Nietzschean thing where every force is a qualitative, or the notion of an intensity is quantitative. What do they call it? Intensive quantity. An intensive quantity changes its nature every time you iterate it. That is to say, you tend to you try to count intensity sequentially or whatever, or in any form, gather them together in some sort of a whole. They're changing their nature every time you try and count past one.
It's my favorite thing about this book is sentences like this. I think this paragraph is like 3 sentences, which is, and it may actually be like one. As I'm looking, as I may just be one giant fucking sentence, because why not? And so much is said, and it makes me wonder if I understand. Generally, I think that this last little bit here, the generalized schizogenesis, whose elements are schizos flows, is them talking, or Deleuze even particularly writing, but I would say them bringing together the idea of difference prior to identity, the generalized schizogenesis, the creation of the split, or how difference is how elements are created, and that the elements of that difference are the schiz flux, the stop start of desiring machines. And I don't think I can read it a different way, because schizogenesis just means the creation of difference and the creation of the split, the breaking through, it does imply, and it's why I don't really like the idea of schizogenesis, it does imply that there is a oneness. And the only way that that works for Deleuze, like, if there is a oneness, the oneness that starts is it's the Spinozist God, the chaos, that in chaos, the schizogenesis happens where we find the split between things, the split of a thing splits, and we actually have the genesis of difference that breaks things out of chaos and ultimately turns them into usable elements, which then we can assign identity, which becomes transferable as that thing shifts and everything. And the elements of this are design machines. Design machines are connecting chaos. And through that, we find the split. I don't think I can break this into a different way. This is, I don't think I'm going to be able to get past that. And it's tickling me in a way that, like, isn't satisfying. But no one's here for me. I find it it's just an unsatisfying phrasing. Because this is the molecular. So when we're talking about the molecular, and again, I'm just going to say this is the book builds off of difference, repetition, and logic of sense. Guattari read Logic of Sense and went, holy shit, you should totally check out my writings, because holy shit, we've got something together. What if your stuff worked like this and my stuff like this? And they went, oh my God, we've got a machinic unconscious. Really simplified version of everything. But so we've got to read sort of all of their works, ultimately sort of through this. And the first part for Deleuze is the way that difference precedes identity. And then ultimately what happens as this happens, as that difference is sort of created. We start with multiplicity. We start with difference. We start with desiring machines and all of this. Ultimately, this given layer of things that happens ontologically is betrayed by operations, ways that things are put together, the structural elements that ultimately result in identity. And what happens is that we presume or we consider that identity comes first, and from that identity, things are split. We end in a Platonic place where we start with the negative of things rather than presuming the affirmative, which is for Deleuze the big deal. So for him, this sentence is awkward and uses so much of the fucking wrong terms, but it's this plays into that setup of difference being the basis, difference sorting through the chaos, and the betrayal comes after that. And that's this next paragraph is the betrayal, the creation of representation, the creation of identity in a way that covers up, supersedes, tricks desire machine, tricks desire, plays with desire, traps desire inside of identities and inside of identity systems to be attracted to, that are then ideal and create neuroses and these other mental conditions as they've talked about it. And that's kind of the setup they're putting here, that we've got this base layer of difference that starts, but then the machines happen and they become unified. This first bit is going to tickle me in a lot of ways I'm not happy with, though, for a while until we can get somewhere. I'm happy to keep going on. I don't think everyone wants to sit and watch me battle inside my fucking brain fighting ghosts. The big deal for the text for what it is that they are going through the molecular regime here of desiring production. That is what is happening. The molar machines on one side, whether social, technical, or organic, and on the other side, desiring machines, which are of a molecular order. Then they go through what desiring machines are, as we've talked about. They are this, they create time in their formation, but the formation itself is itself part of their forming, and there's no breaking them apart. Desiring machines are a unique multiplicity that does this and is playing with things in this very particular way. We're about to dive into a larger paragraph that is, I believe, more difficult because we're talking about representation as we move forward. And I just want to ask if there's any last notes or questions. I hope, Bathy, I hope I helped a little bit. I did not, I'm very aware, but I hope I did a little. Because we're about to get into like a lot more.
Well, so I mean, I'm sort of I've been trying to understand Anti-Oedipus for like a couple of years, not like spending a lot of time on it, but just kind of letting things wash over me. So this is all valuable.
Oh, well,
seeing if it all
I've been trying to
fits
understand for a
together.
few years and have been wasting a lot of time on it. So you're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
It's only funny a little bit. It's only funny a little bit. Oh, that depressed me as I said it out loud. It is not easy. Like this is the reason I love this reading is because it is one of those incredibly complicated books that at no point do I think is bullshit. At all. They are referring to things. They are very particular about language. Things are connecting back to it. It's continually working, but it is a process, to say the least. Is anyone else good? All right. Then we're going to continue forward and we're going to move on to subsequently, or rather, we should say, on the other hand, when the machines become unified at the structural level of techniques and institutions that give them an existence as visible as a plate of steel, when the living, too, becomes structured by the statistical unities of their persons and their species, varieties, and locales, when a machine appears as a single object and a living organism appears as a single subject, when the connections become global and specific, the disjunctions exclusive, the conjunctions biunivocal, then desire does not need to project itself into these forms that have become opaque. These forms are immediately molar manifestations, statistical determinations of desire and of its own machines. They are the same machines. There is no difference in nature. Here, as organic, technical, or social machines, apprehended in their mass phenomena, to which they become subordinated. There, as desiring machines, apprehended in their sub-microscopic singularities that subordinate the mass phenomena. That is why, from the start, we have rejected the idea that desiring machines belong to the domain of dreams or the imaginary, that they stand in for other machines. There is only desire and environments, fields, forms of herd instinct. Stated differently, the molecular desiring machines are in themselves the investment of the large molar machines, or of the configurations that the desiring machines form according to the law of large numbers, in either or both senses of subordination, in one sense and the other of subordination. Desiring machines in one sense, but organic, technical, or social machines in the other. These are the same machines under determinate conditions. By determinate conditions, we mean those statistical forms into which the machines enter. So many stable forms, unifying, structuring, and proceeding by means of large, heavy aggregates. The selective pressures that group the parts retain some of them and exclude others, organizing the crowds. These are therefore the same machines, but not at all the same regime, the same relationships of magnitude, or the same uses of syntheses. It is only at the sub-microscopic level of desiring machines that there exists a functionalism, machinic arrangements, an engineering of desire, for it is only there that functioning and formation, use and assembly, product and production merge. All molar functionalism is false, since the organic or social machines are not formed in the same way they function, and the technical machines are not assembled in the same way they are used, but imply precisely the specific conditions that separate their own production from their distinct product. Only what is not produced in the same way it functions has meaning. and also a purpose and intention. The desiring machines, on the contrary, represent nothing, signify nothing, mean nothing, and are exactly what one makes of them, what is made with them, what they make in themselves. It's not as hard as the other paragraph, but there's a lot said here. Please, Josh.
What do you think about the use of the word false in reference to the molar? I think that's interesting.
Which
The functioning of the molar is false.
All molar functionalism is false because the molar doesn't function. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's actually find out what I think of that, because I have the French up here. Sorry, I am that person. Law of large numbers. Here we go. Let's do it. All right, I see you there. All right. How I interpret it and how I read this, this one is one of the things that like actually drove me to the book for a long time. The idea that I want something is a molar functionalism. I don't want something. There is no I that there can be to want something, nor is there wanting something. All molar functionalism is false. Necessarily, I am the emergent existence and the production of the desiring machines that make up the existence of the organism, body, machine, whatever you want to call it, that is Brooks. And they are functional. They produce, and they produce me. And I'm produced at the end of that cycle. But the functionalism sits with desiring machines, not me. But the mistake becomes that I start thinking I exist, that TV exists, that you exist, that computers exist, and I do this. I made this. I made this. I am me. The TV made everyone do this. Video games made people do this, blah, blah. Functionalism at the molar level is false because the organic and social machines are not formed in the way that they function. It's a big fucking deal. That's a really great phrase that they have at the end here, because they're built, they're formed, but they're not formed how they function. Their function is in the desiring machines that make them up, that produce them, but that's not how they function. And the technical machines are not assembled in the same way they are used. You don't build a TV the way you watch a TV, to put it bluntly, that setup. But instead, it implies precisely the specific conditions that separate their own production from their distinct product. This break is what they're talking about here. This is the deal. Only what is not produced in the same way it functions has a meaning and a purpose and an intention, because it doesn't produce the thing that it was made as, which I think works. To me, it makes sense immediately, but it's one of those things that's like a really interesting break apart, because we kind of do assume, and the way we create and talk about technical machines, especially social machines, we do talk about them as though they are formed in what they do, that they are almost an end within themselves, right? That they are, pick a fucking thing in the revolutionary capacity thing, because that's what this book is about. Pick anything. Oh, look, the local leftist group is doing this. It's not how they were formed. They were formed from very different conditions.
So this may be an off-the-wall question, but why does it make sense to use a word like false to make this comparison between the molar and the molecular in terms of the functioning, when it wouldn't when one talks about how the forms and stratifications, say, in biology or in physics, in other words, that there's a value, isn't there a value judgment?
I would say in physics and let's give an example in physics. If I say my hand pushed the ball, it's not false, but you go, well, no, that's not really how force works, right? That's not really how force works, but that's the easy way for us to describe it, and we do. And kind of people who play in science and play in all these things are aware of these odd, weird metaphors and ways of simplifying that usually simplify to the point of destroying the original reality of what is happening, or the original science behind the thing, which is basically all science, I want to say, gets destroyed in this way. Actually, science in general may be a really good way to talk about this. When we talk about gravity, when we talk about you, as you stand on the earth, have a weight down, but the earth is pushing up that much on you. That's always, it's always equal. Otherwise, you'd sink or you'd go up. Like, it's always equal. That's why you're staying where you're fucking at. That's fucking insane and weird to think about. And so we don't talk about it that way. We talk about, oh, I'm being pulled down this much to the center. Like, that's it. That's the end of it. But that's not what's happening. You're not being pulled down. And the earth isn't pulling you down. Instead, what it is it's the entire mass of every single molecule that exists in the earth and everywhere around the earth, and also everywhere in the entire galaxy that is known to everything. Every molecule is always pulling on every other molecule in every single way, but collections of them obviously do a little bit more. And so that reality means that you're being pulled in this way towards the earth. We simplify it with the representation, but that's not the case. There is no earth that pulls on Brooks. There's no such thing. There's collections of molecules, right?
Do you think that we're supposed to take all of Deleuze's descriptions of processes that take place, say, in the biological or within the physical sphere, in terms of how we understand these processes? For example, in Thousand Plateaus, he says, talks about the Earth, the deterritorialized, the glacial, the giant molecule is a body without organs. This body without organs is permeated by unformed, unstable matters, flows in all directions, free intensities, nomadic singularities. That, however, was not the question. There simultaneously occurs upon the Earth a very important, inevitable phenomenon that is beneficial in many respects and unfortunate in others. Stratification. Strata are layers, belts. They consist of giving form to matters, of imprisoning intensities or locking singularities into systems of resonance and redundancy. So is what he talking about, or does it even make sense for me to ask the question in this way? Is what he's talking about here the way that we're supposed to understand how these processes and the so-called natural world are in themselves, or the way the false way in which we describe them?
I would answer that it's about understanding what we're actually saying. And I would say it's in line with the way that, and he does this in Logic of Sense, I think, very well. And it's one of the things I think Guattari actually writes about, not about the Stoics, but in various ways in his own 3 ecologies, he does this pretty well. But he talks about basically the awareness of what we're saying, because if we don't have awareness of what we're saying and how it conditions what we're saying, we kind of get drugged along. Bruno Latour, I did a reading 2 days ago of Latour's We Are Never Modern. And his conception of modernism, I think, plays within this. So if you'll bear with me. For Latour, the moderns are those who specifically regard or have the image of thought that nature and man are separate. And so they break apart the two. There's this break. And then also on the other side of it, the way that they then make up or deal with this break is by actually creating hybridizations of nature and man that they don't avow. And so there's this existence or system of thought of that. The postmoderns are not an evolution of that, except in that they're cynically understanding that, but they're also not stepping above it. To get beyond that, we need to be non-modern. And this would be Deleuze's, and I think Latour, and I think fucking pick another French fuck who was talking about this stuff, but you're talking about like the non-philosophy, non-X, non-human sex, non-this, whatever it is to step outside of that. It doesn't mean like these languages or these words are like, oh, we must change how everything. It's like, no, like if we have that understanding, just having that understanding, according to Latour, of what modernism is, means you're not modern. You're no longer modern. That's it. You're fucking done. You can't be modern and know this. And that meta grasp is something that I think if you talk about Chrysippus and the old Stoics, the understanding that they had of how language works and how they were able to play with it, that shifted how they made sense, literally, how they made sense of the sentences. So when someone would say, I am cutting you with a knife, for example, I'm a scalpel is cutting skin with a knife. It's like, or is the skin dimming the blade, like, because that would be, they understood this is how the language works. This is how representation operates. They played with it. And by playing with it, they constantly were able to sort of dance at the surface, as Deleuze talks about in Logic of Sense, dance at the surface between the depths of bodies and the ideality of the heights. And if we're able to maintain that, as thus spoke Zarathustra did, or others, Nietzsche for sure played in the depths, but also played into the heights. If we can do that, we can stay at the space of where sense is made, and we're able to play with it. We're able to counteractualize. So here, to just bring that all forward, the way that molar functionalism works is by us not interrogating it. And if we do not interrogate, if we presume, and a lot of people fucking do, that I want something. Brooks wants a fucking candy. I want candy right now. Sorry, I've got a 7-year-old. That's been a thing lately. I want candy. Do I want candy? No. And if you understand how communications are happening, if you're able to sort of grasp that these words are actually just the end result, and actually what we've got is this reality of desire playing around, that meta understanding shifts how you make sense of any of these sentences. In the same way, just to bring it back to the scientists, that if I say, if they say to someone, well, actually, it's gravity pulling you down, they're aware of all the other knock-on parts. They are making sense of that sentence completely different than a 4-year-old who's like, wait, pulled? So who's pulling me? Are there ghosts? That difference is what they're talking about in my mind. And it's why they say molar functionalism is false, but they're particular here. It's not that it's a trick played on people. It's false from a critical perspective. People still live and talk as if there is molar functionalism, as if molar functionalism is the thing that everything is. This is the delirium. This is the fantasy. This is, to just take straight from Klosowski, this is the delirium and fantasy. It's what they talked about in here. It's what they'll continue to. The molar functionalism that happens, the presumption of what that is built of experience, life, politics, everything, all that stuff that's sort of being built up in desiring production and shoved out through that person. So when, in the case of Anti-Oedipus, we have an analyst and an analysand, and you're talking and they say, hey, I have sunbeams coming out of my ass. You wouldn't believe it. They're so bright. You can go, wow, oh, sunbeams. What a fucking weirdo. Like, whoa. And you can stay in the molar, or you can go, sunbeams are coming out. What are they doing? And you can chase it, because you understand that it is not that the sunbeams are doing anything. There is no functionalism in the molar, none. And you're able to sort of sidestep and start talking about what actually produces that thing, or the resultant thing, or the resultant thing after that, because what is produced can be explained. It can be thought of, and you can give explanations. You can go on conspiracy theory in your own shit all the time. People do fucking all the time, and the world. But there is no molar functionalism. That's the point. Sorry for the ramble. Does that make sense, Josh?
Yeah. That's really fascinating area for me.
It's literally my favorite. Right now I'm rereading, and I cannot recommend to you enough, Klosowski, his Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle. Living Currency as well, but Klosowski is absolutely, completely changing my mind on, just in general, he's an unsung hero of Deleuze's world. Even though we know Deleuze quotes him and Deleuze loves him, we don't really see how much until you read both of those books and you're like, oh, it's everything. He makes tweaks, and I think Deleuze makes very good tweaks, thanks to Guattari's work as well, also in this. But Klosowski and the way that the phantasm operates, the fantasy that is created, the molar functionalism. The government will take care of me. No, it won't. That's not a thing. Governments don't do anything. States don't do anything. They are molar elements that we sort of describe and we use. But if you're unaware of this, and this is, I think, general critical theory works, is probably an easier way to go about this. But if I say the state doesn't do anything, that's not what a state does. People in the state do things, and they're compelled by various pushes and incentives in various directions, depending on how power is structured and what the people underneath them are doing. And in reality, every state has always been a democracy in the sense that the majority of people allow a thing to exist. But the reality is, here's how these structures and these things fall back on each other and grow up. But a child would go, yeah, but the king said no. That's why it's not a democracy. The king said no. That's why people didn't do stuff. And also, democracy is when everyone's equal. It's like molar functionalism is fucked up because it does this. It totalizes and fills up. And so the way that this happens, and they have the line here, since organic and social machines are not formed in the same way they function. And you have to think of it that way. They are built, these molar machines, social and organic, but even technical, they're not formed in the way that they function. That's not how they set up. Desiring machines are formed in the way that they function. They are formed and function. They are form and function almost at once. It's the really fucking wild thing about the way they were phrasing that last little bit, and it's why I kept kind of going back and forth over all of it. But it's the thing that they kept saying about it, that the very misfirings are functional, whose functioning is indiscernible from their formation. Desiring production is desire, and the connection and disconnection and all that. We don't break it apart. We can't, like, that's not a thing. It's all one simultaneous immanent process to itself that happens through the syntheses and that produces, and the molar is produced. But at the end of the line, you don't talk about how your Nintendo console is playing Mario. No, you play fucking Mario. You play Mario on the console, and it's built in a factory, but the factory doesn't build factories. It doesn't factory. It builds Nintendo consoles. Like, this is the difference. Desiring machines are the thing that is produced in themselves and that process. This is the difference. This is why when we talk about like the ontological level for D&G being desiring production, form and function are one in that. This is the extraction of the chaos, the chaosmosis that forms all of this. But the molar is built like a mountain, and the desiring machines and everything are, there's a lot of them doing stuff. It's doing things, but there isn't my hand isn't really choosing to pick up my teacup, and I'm not taking a drink from it. But that's how we talk about it. If we're aware of the meta conversation that's actually happening, and you can be, it's actually not a wild leap, suddenly everything makes sense differently. Right, Josh?
Yeah, no, yeah, that makes sense.
Agricultural pessimist.
Oh,
it's Marcellus Wallace. Hello.
Yeah, Marcellus Wallace. I changed that.
That's okay.
Okay.
It's you're good. What's up?
How are you doing? I kind of like I want to connect it back to the molecular unconscious, right? And first of all, I have two sets of names because I'm starting with DNG after I finish Hegel. Like you have like Felix and Guattari, like Guattari, right? Started with he started talk about, like, I bought both of his books, right? The Molecular Unconscious and The Revolution in Brazil. And I want to explain to me how it's connected back to the desiring machine, this idea of molecular unconscious. That's the simple, it's a naive question, but that's all of it,
Yeah. It's and so when we talk about these elements and how they sort of come together, that's kind of the big point here, because it's the way he's got phrasing. 1 second. It's I want to talk about the investment, because this is where, again, how these things come together. It's not that one produces the other and then is unaware of it. Like, again, they're not aware of the totality of it. Desiring machines don't really know all of you. They're not, just think of them as almost one-dimensional creatures who altogether produce 4 dimensions. They're not like aware of everything, but they've got little bits. They kind of can sort of, and the way that they deal is they become invested. They become invested in these elements. And that's kind of the thing that they start talking about when they move into the gregarious part of this. 1 second. I want to make sure I get this right. If anyone's got a specific thing, feel free to jump in while I'm looking for this little bit really quick. Here, Sarah, here at the bottom. They have stated differently. That's fine. But essentially, we're saying molecular designing machines are themselves, in themselves, the investment of the large molar machines, or of the configurations that the desiring machines form according to the law of large numbers. I want to read the footnote here. Law of large numbers, if you don't know it, law of large numbers is it means in aggregate, but just to say simply, because this is a statistics quote, and I love that they fucking talk about statistics like barely in this, like nakedly, defines the law of large numbers as follows. The larger the sample, the less will be the variability in the sample proportions. The basis of the law of large numbers is that for an improbable event to occur in times is improbable to the nth degree. The larger the group's averaged, the less the variation. That setup. So law of large numbers is if you take every American, right? The law of large numbers is what is an American? This is the law of large numbers. White person, right? White guy, probably. White woman, maybe. But when you average everything together, what is the law of large numbers? It puts you in a very specific category. This is the thing. The larger the group's average, the less the variation. The law of large numbers. Statistical, like, certainty as a thing. As you add more things to it, again, large numbers. We're not talking about going from 1 to 10. That adds variability. We're talking about going from 10 to a mole. Molar. A mole is, just to make sure mole is what? Scientifically. It is, I never get this right, so I always have to look it up. Someone yelled at me. 6.022, 6,022,140,000 times 10 to the 23rd of a thing. We're talking about large numbers. So when we talk about desiring machines, we're talking about molecular. We're talking about at the molecular level, atomic level. We're talking about like tiny, tiny fucking things. And in large numbers, they seem to average out, even though they don't. They don't. At large, they do. At the molar. This is not a weird, it's a weird word. It's a fucking weird word, but that's the idea, right? Avogadro's number, thank you, is yes. I never get it exactly right. I always fuck it up. But we're talking about at the very large numbers. And so when we talk about this setup and we're playing with this, it's the phrasing they've got here. To just read the whole sentence and we'll go over it. Stated differently, the molecular desiring machines are in themselves the investment of the large molar machines, or of the configurations that desiring machines form according to the law of large numbers in either or both senses of subordination, in one sense and the other of subordination. The subordinating is the phrasing that's really important here, because they've talked about this representation and how representation makes subordinate X, Y, or Z. The spoken word and the graphism, the vocality and graphism, how one subordinates the other in the written word, where we have the written and the vocal word coming together, but one is subordinated. One is underneath. One is trapped. One is handled by the other or controlled by the other. And that is where they talk about this subordination. And I want to, before I do that, everyone following so far? Generally acceptable, basically?
Like subordination, like pit. Like you kind of show us about a linguist who kind of in the early like reading, you show us about like the idea that like, like kind of linguistically speaking, like, every phoneme is separate. I don't know, like I forgot, but like pit, there's a linguist, a book. After that you can reference to me, to read it. The linguist who kind of,
Yeah, and there's a couple. And again, the subordination is and we'll kind of dive into real particularities around it, but the subordination is going to be the big deal for them here. And
Was it
sorry, go ahead.
Yaroslav?
What?
Was it the guy?
Yeah, it's always
Yamslev.
If I mention a linguist, if someone's like, Brooks mentioned a linguist, the answer is almost always Yamslev. Occasionally, I talk about McLuhan. Occasionally, I talk about others. But Yamslev is the thing, because for him, it's about understanding content and expression, how one is subordinate to the other in the way that we talk, but also how each one has its own content and expression. So you're talking about content and expression that's subordinate to content and expression inside of every enunciation, is how he talked about it. And it completely fucks with how we understand kind of all these pieces of language works, and it's really great. I posted in the DGQC, and they're in the library, a handful of books around Yamslev that sort of deal with it. But it's a really wild ride. If you're into semiotics at all, I highly suggest Prolegema, whatever, of a theory of language, a resume of language, or language itself. If you're a mathematical person, just jump straight to language and enjoy the fucking ride, because he takes symbolic logic visually to really weird places. And I don't grasp it, but I grasp part of it, and then I fucking feel really, really, really stupid. If that makes sense. But yeah. The way that they sort of play with the subjugation, though, to just talk about sort of how these things come together. Let's see, we'll go to which part of this paragraph do I want to talk about? This is about what I was just talking about with the way that we talk about science or anything, my long ramble a moment ago. They are the same machines. There's no difference in nature here as organic, technical, or social machines, apprehended in their mass phenomena to which they become subordinated. Again, this is, I don't want to say it's perspectivist, but it's important that when we're making sense of things, that the position that we're in or how we're looking or whatever it is, the process of that making sense, it's not really perspectivist, but it is this particularly odd sentence, the way that they structure this. Let's talk of two sides. Here, as organic, technical, or social machines, apprehended in their mass phenomena, to which they become subordinated. The mass phenomena subordinates them. There, as desiring machines, apprehended in their submicroscopic singularities that subordinate the mass phenomena. There's no breaking this. It's either going to be that as you talk about things, you are subordinating desire, because you are prefacing, privileging, and putting the mass of them, they would say fantasy, the representation, you're putting that in a position of primacy, under which the mass reality are subordinated. The mass production of desire is subordinated. Or you're privileging desiring production. And desiring production being privileged means that you're subordinating representation to it. That's it. It is a binary thing in this, as they're talking about it. There's no third way that they give that I'm aware of. You're free to point it out if you know it. But because of how we have the two regimes, you specifically are either privileging one or the other. One is subordinate to the other. And its subordinate is a word that they use consistently, and it's important because as we talk about going on, as we move to as you move to 1,000 plateaus, if you go to mid-plateau and you have that, or if you start reading secondary texts from the rest of them, you'll see Holland really makes this point, but I think a lot do, that, and I think they even clearly say in this, to get to a point where representation as a thing is subordinated to desiring production is their goal. It's not that we will ever lose representation. Representation is an extraordinary tool. It's an amazing tool. So it's a wonderful, stunning tool where we're able to find resonances and odd connections that simply would never have happened without it. But if we privilege representation, we stay in the molar aggregates And it doesn't allow for those great leaps. In fact, it's a space of segregation and exclusive disjunctions and separation and fascising tendencies, to be frank, as they talk about it.
There's an important sentence here, right? Quote, "We have rejected the idea that desire machine belong to the domain of dreams or imaginary, and that they are stand in for the other machines," right? That's an interesting perspective. Like, what is the context mean? Like, for that, like, Brooks, if
What do you mean? Sorry, the context. Because I don't want to be stupid and say it's in the page, because that's a shitty way to respond. But
no, you pointed at it on your mouse. That is why from the start we have rejected the idea. Yeah. So what's the context of that? Like,
so this is a the book is Anti-Oedipus, a materialist psychoanalysis, materialist psychiatry. Their goal is to do away with the old way psychoanalysis formed, how psychoanalysis worked. And this is why I try not to step on these, because what I'm about to do is I'm about to do the thing where I say, I'm going to teach you something, and then you need to unlearn it. That's what I'm about to do. So for Lacan, Freud, Klein, Reich, Zizek, fucking name it, and Jung, it doesn't matter. Like, pick someone who plays in the space of the unconscious or any of those things. They talk about the imaginary. What they do is they actually are pulling the molar concepts or the totalities or the singular molar elements into the unconscious. So it's the molar all the way down for them. So when we talk about, and they say here, the desire machines do not belong to the domain of dreams or the imaginary, and that they stand in for other machines. Stand in is the important part of this sentence, because generally speaking, when you talk to a psychoanalyst, they're like, oh yes, you see, in your unconscious, you and your father have a lot of strife, and your father, as the authority figure, is ultimately the stand-in for your boss. Your boss, it's why you don't get along with him. So these things become what are playing in my brain. I'm having trouble with these elements that are whole molar aggregates. I'm not taking the time to understand how, the actual desire and production investments that are working. No. In everything, it's molar all the way down. And that's what the imaginary is. That's why they put a capital I on it. This is a fuck you to Lacan, straight up. Straight up a fuck you to Lacan.
Because in the seminar one, you're actually kind of right, because in seminar one, actually alluding to Freud, he discussed that like the unconscious is time, right? Is the time is I don't know, roughly phrase it like time is the unconscious, right? It's the creation or the production of time is the unconscious in a Freudian, like Lacanian sense. So alluding to the imaginary through the symbolic, kind of way. But I don't know. You're kind of right on that regard.
The sentence is particular, and it's aimed at Lacan, because for him, basically the imaginary is the space of the unconscious and the way that we sort of deal with identification, and everything sort of dances around on it like a stage, like actors on a stage is a phrase he used a lot. It's a phrase they critique a lot. Guattari really critiques a lot. But ultimately, the imaginary is how we see things. The real is the space we can't see. And then the symbolic is, you could say, connective threads that are mediated by a master signifier that say, here's what these things mean. But again, it's whole bodies to whole bodies to whole bodies to whole bodies to an unknown real we can't touch. And they're like, no. Desire and desiring production are not like whole things that are directly analogous. There isn't like a daddy desiring machine that's playing around in my brain that's changing what I understand daddy to be. The idea, the concept of daddy is not something that runs around in my brain that I'm fucking with. That's not what's happening. That's a whole thing. That's a molar aggregate of desiring machines itself. And we need to go sort of to this molecular to understand how these things sort of play. And it's not that they're being derived from an unknowable real. That's not what's happening. It's that the real is what is being produced by desiring machines. So it's a completely different, it's a whoop, flip there. And that's why they say their next line, because they say that we're not saying they stand in for other machine, like the stupids. There's only desire and environments, fields, forms of herd instinct. Stated differently, molecular desire machines are in themselves the investment of the large molar machines or of the configurations that the desire machines form according to the law of large numbers. So that it's not that it's all molar, it's all these big identities. It's not that it's all this tiny shit. In fact, all of it is all the same stuff. It's just a matter of scale and magnitude and recognition of this. Again, molar to molecular. And it's like, again, the way we talk about gravity, I think is like my favorite, because the reality is I am not attracted to the earth. That is not what gravity is. That's like the magician's version. And the simplified version we give children, which works because fucking kids need to learn things. But the reality of every single molecule that's where's the magnetic, like the gravitational center of the earth? It's never in the same place ever. It's never. Everything in the earth, magma and water and the moon and everything, changes that center constantly. There is literally no moment in time that this will ever be constant. Even as the earth dies, it's still being pulled in different places. So the center of the earth, that only exists as a collection of the aggregate of realities of forces of everything that exists in the world. But what we're doing is we're saying, hey, because science, mathematics creates functions, and the functions of things are, hey, this is the limits of the earth, and let's find out where's the general center. Okay, well, this is all one thing, and I'm one thing, and let's measure between that object and this object. And they're particular because they call them that. That's functions, but they're not saying you are that object. That is an abstraction, but we fuck that up. Again, this is the process of being stuck within the fantasy, being stuck within the molar, being stuck within representation, and having desiring production completely subordinated to it. Or I can very much say exactly those things, but also be aware of what I'm saying. And because of that, I'll even phrase it differently. And I'll say, the way you're made up, the collection of molecules you are, has its center shifting. Generally, you're right here. It sounds even cooler, but it's the same thing. And that difference is how we subordinate.
Yeah. It's kind of like, Lacan, to pardon me if this, scrambled, he used his own molar, right? And he kind of conceived that the function of the unconscious is kind of, he took the orthodox position with Freud which is the unconscious is something that is not in time, it's not time, but it's what creates time, right? And he kind of used it as a way to kind of allude to kind of like the construction of the symbolic order, right? Even though that he's,
and this is why, again, I think Guattari is, as much as people laugh and make jokes about how Guattari hated Lacan, I don't think he did. I think they had issues. Guattari was also kind of a dick in a lot of ways, but and so was Lacan, from what I understand. What do you think? Hey, French fucking psychoanalysis philosophy guys are kind of dicks. Who would have fucking thought? But the way that he worked, he was taking what Lacan did, like the actual way that Lacan broke Freud down, and he just reapplied it to Lacan. He did the deleuze thing without even knowing it. And when he did that, he had a lot of issues because he couldn't quite find, because he was still basing a lot of his work, his early stuff, was still based in identity in the same way. And it wasn't really flowing. But the eureka moment for him of reading Deleuze and how these things came together and how it completely fucked with everything is the big deal. And so he's sitting there and he's going, okay, we've got now this machinic unconscious, and desire is at the base of it. And as it grows, as we have this understanding of difference at the base, and identity forms from this. And as we do this, we have either the ability to subordinate desire or subordinate representation. And this is where we're starting to get to, because again, the goal for this book specifically, and I have to run, I have a meeting in like -2 minutes. I apologize to everyone. I've got work. But the thing here, and again, be focused on it, they're very much speaking at this point to psychoanalysts, the analyst type, the person who's thinking through this in the way of traditional Lacanian or Freudian, hey, everything is symbols dancing around. They're like, no, there is no such thing as that molar function. There is no Brooks wants a thing. Brooks, this is the end result. This is the way the representation, the desiring production is doing a lot. And it's invested in all those things. Desiring production is invested in parts. And you have to understand in the same way that Brooks is not wanting, right? Brooks doesn't want to stand on the earth. And the earth doesn't want Brooks to stay there. Talking about it like that would be silly. That would be silly, but that's kind of how we talk about everything. And instead, we can say that we're like, look, Brooks is attracted to the earth, which is the same thing, by the way. The earth is attracted to Brooks, same thing. The attracted wants, whatever. No, it doesn't know Brooks and Brooks doesn't know the earth. The molar aspects of it is the easier way for us to describe, and we can do that if we are aware of what we're subordinating and making the choice. I have to run. I apologize to everyone. This has been lovely. Next week, we will probably actually reread this paragraph. I hate to say, I want to make my way through it again. In a day or two, I'm going to do another stream, and we'll focus on this. I'm going to be streaming a lot this week. But right now, I've got work. And as much as I love you, paychecks are good. So I'm going to go do that. And thank you all for joining. It has been absolutely wonderful and lovely. If you want to join us here on... because I'm sorry, Discord, I have to talk to YouTube. Please join us actually in person. We love having people here to talk, to interrupt, to discuss, to ask questions, because it forces me to go, oh, fuck, I actually don't know what I'm talking about sometimes, which is real and a fucking real thing. Discord.gg/DGQC. Please support us. Otherwise, we're at Patreon, obviously patreon.com/DGQC, and also super chats and memberships. Otherwise, I will see you all